well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of this amazing podcast called Sunday's Coming. Not to be confused with, I think there's a song or an album or something called Sunday's Coming.
Thanks a lot, Phil Wickham.
It really boosts our numbers and searches because we pop up when they're looking for Phil Wickham, but thanks. That's great.
It's great SEO.
But I'm here with Kaleb, as always, and excited to be talking with Jeff Boriss today.
How are you?
Jeff,
Hey.
Thanks for being here, man.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure.
What spring break stuff should we know about you and your family? We're in Chicago anyway. We're coming off spring break.
Yeah.
Did you guys do anything crazy or go anywhere or
This year we did
staycation?
not. Actually, honestly, we finished the sauna that we were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
So home projects.
Yes, I built a sauna in my basement studio, and it doubles as an ISO booth, and I love it.
I mean, so smart.
Just telling you, like we were joking this week at NAB, like, man, I need a sauna and a polar plunge. And do you do cold plunge too?
No, because we can just walk outside.
That's
Also that.
Whatever.
It's like that 4 days ago or whatever.
Also that. Yeah, it's kind of a, I don't know, and the ones that like keep it cold all the time are like very expensive. And like in the summertime, the one that I have, like I could put a lot of ice in to keep it.
You do that? You have a cold plunge? Oh,
Just
never done it before.
like a little like
Right. Oh, yeah. Inflatable?
rubber, yeah, almost like inflatable, but it's got like a little bit of like insulation on the side. But like in the wintertime, like I'll be out there, I'll, like be in the hot tub or whatever, I'll like smack it and try to crack the crack the ice that forms through the whole thing.
I've
But
never done the cold plunge thing.
it's not pleasant at all.
But do you feel like you're getting benefits?
Oh,
from it?
great. You feel great afterwards, but it's very.
See, I feel great after the sauna.
Yeah.
So I think your train of thought here is right on. But
Yeah.
Nice.
do you? How many kids do you have?
2.
Okay,
2
and they like the
boys.
sauna?
Oh my gosh, they
Yeah.
love it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the first thing when their friends come over. It's like, let's go in the sauna and play games.
Play
They bring
games?
a board game in. What? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Wait, how hot are you? Do you have this turned up? It must not be that hot.
Oh yeah, I mean we can get it. I think the hottest we've got it has been like 2. Well,
You're playing
1,
Monopoly.
202.
All the pieces are
That's very
damp,
hot.
and the
Yeah, I
money.
mean, that was like the test. Like,
Yeah.
how can I stress test this
Wow,
thing? But usually it's
okay.
in like the 165s, 180s.
Yeah, that's
something
pretty
like
good.
that.
so your kids are playing board games in the sauna.
Yes.
Monopoly,
Wow.
you know, the things you
amazing.
do.
Oh, it's awesome.
amazing.
That's crazy,
Yeah,
man.
apples to apples.
That is hilarious.
That's awesome you can get it that hot, though.
yeah, it's great.
I can't remember. I was in some sauna. It was maybe like 190 degrees at some point last year, and I was with some buddies, and I forgot that I was wearing like a gold chain, and like I was like leaning
Oh, yeah, it
over,
burns you.
and you know just like sweating, and then I leaned back, and it like hit my chest. I was like, oh my gosh, it feels like actual lava on my neck right now, because it just heats up so much.
The
But
original cover plate for the dimmable light switches I had in was metal, and I wasn't thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And then like a week later, after we got it working, you know, I went to go touch it and slipped, and was like, oh, hey, maybe I
It's
should
so
just go.
hot.
Man.
Yeah.
Well, that is an amazing spring break
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun.
adventure. That's very cool. Very cool. Well, Jeff, you currently serve in a role at a church.
I do.
Yeah, a role at a church.
A role at a church,
So
yes.
maybe do a quick little introduction of what you do, where you're serving at, kind of what that looks like. What's the scope of your role there? And then we can kind of back up and just, you know, it's always fun to hear the winding paths that lead the guests we have on the show to get to where they're at. And I'd love to hear kind of how you ended up doing what you're doing now, man.
Cool. Well, I am the Central Arts and Worship Pastor at Willow Creek Community Church in South Barrington and a bunch of other locations, which is awesome. I just passed my 3-year anniversary there. So it's been 3 years. I oversee all of the arts and worship stuff at all of the locations. So I lead a central team, and sort of like our mission and vision is to help the campuses like do the work of the ministry as best as possible. And then there are campus staffs that are part of our arts and worship team. They have some obviously have campus responsibilities like that. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun. So I got here, like I said, 3 years ago to Willow, and it's been simultaneously like one of the hardest things I've ever done and one of the most fun things I've ever done.
Yeah, yeah.
It's wild, dude. When I met you, I think the first time it would I'm sure it was around some Philo that was being hosted down in Naperville at Community Christian, and I remember like the first time I walked in there, I was like, "This what a stinking cool room and building." And I live way up north in the far like northern suburbs, and so it was like the biggest hike to get down there. But so cool and such a nice space, and Yeah, so you came from there?
Yeah,
is that right?
So I was at Community Christian Church in Naperville for 10 years.
It's a long time.
Very long time. Yeah. So I started there, like I said, 10 years ago. And that the building that you're talking about was actually one of my major projects.
Oh, that's cool.
I came in, they were multi-site, they had a ton of locations at the time, and they were experts at the leadership reproduction engine. And at the time it was like, hey, maybe we can get some more energy around arts. And there was already a great artistic culture. It just needed a little bit of little bit of extra stuff. And before that, I had planted a church, and we can keep going back in time over time. But I had a blast working there. I was a creative director at just the Yellow Box location at first, and actually I started as a worship pastor there, which was
really
my favorite thing to do.
So you had to sing.
I had to sing.
Yeah, because earlier you were sharing that you're not a big fan of the singing bit.
Not on microphones.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, just in the shower or the
sauna,
sauna, you know, like belt it out.
Mountaintops.
Nice.
Whatever. But so did that for a while, and then over time, entered into more of a central role that helped oversee a big chunk of the creative process with another guy there who's still a close friend named Eric Bramlett, who I've been friends with and a coworker with for years. And so that was a ton of fun. But the major project there was the new auditorium.
Yeah.
And that one was super fun because that was the first time that I was really able to kind of use all of the experience and venues that I had been a part of or playing as a musician or just been a part of, and really say, like, how can we craft a building that really feels like the culture of this place? So we took some awesome creative risks that actually kind of panned out in beautiful ways. I'm super proud of that space.
Yeah,
it's really
awesome.
fun.
Yeah, the whole building is very much unlike any church that I ever walked in. Even just the auditorium, just like, man, it's very compact, but you fit so much stuff in there, and it still seats quite a few people.
Yeah, it could go all the way up to about 1,100. But
that's crazy. It doesn't. No, I honestly would have guessed like 800.
Yeah.
But that's awesome, man. Yeah, I remember those first couple of Philos that we were hosting there, like just packed out with all these church production people and singing, and you can hear everybody, and just it was a really, really awesome space.
Cool. I'm curious, you mentioned starting out as a worship pastor there at Community Christian and then shifting your role. Was that part of like an overall organizational shift to have more of a central approach, or what was that journey that as your role evolved?
Yeah, so the journey was we didn't have a worship pastor at the time. And so that was never the goal of the design.
So you came in thinking you would be doing one thing?
No, I knew that I might have to step in for a season.
Okay.
And was like, okay, that's probably fine.
Yeah.
You know? But like what's been weird about my church journey, for lack of a better word, is like God has really kind of like almost shoved me through doors, if that makes any sense.
Totally.
So like even all the way back to like how I got started in church stuff, I was obviously in high school and not great at like math and stuff, but loved art, science, literature, like all that kind of stuff. So I knew pretty early that I wasn't going to be like a mathematologist or whatever they're called.
Yes. Yes.
So I was really into music. I was in a bunch of bands. I was playing at colleges even while I was in high school. So like I was the kid that they'd have to like usher out right immediately out of the bar at the end of the venue because I was underage.
Oh, nice.
Give me like a little like dispensation to be able to play the show.
So funny.
And then did that thing where like at the end of my high school career, like I grew up in a Christian home, but I was very much like, my question was never like, is there a God? It was which one? This might be getting a little bit too
it's great, man.
Fantastic, man.
So I spent a lot of time sort of exploring all the world religions, just kind of going which one feels right, which one fits, which one kind of falls apart logically over time. And I had a bunch of practices that I would do and had a bunch of rubrics that I would try to do just to kind of get to the point of saying like, yeah, I'm going to be this one or not. And I did that process with Christianity last because I grew up in it.
Yeah.
Felt too familiar.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I think this is the right one.
That's interesting.
I think this is it. So I truncated that story a lot, but
no, that's super
this
interesting.
Might be it. So anyway, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like that's a very mature thing for a young aged person to even like go through the process of. I remember some class in college that I took, and it was like some biblical studies, and we had like a retreat over a weekend that went to all of these different Like we went to a synagogue, we went to a mosque, we went to like all of these crazy different places that I have never spent any time in or had any interest of. And I was like, this is fascinating, just to see how all of these different, religions practice and the things that are important to them and not. And, but that's super cool.
I'm curious, as you think back about that exercise and like the different things you explored, which kind of faith stream that you explored was the most surprising, or actually was like resonated with you the most, or like you least expected to experience what you experienced when you unpack some of their stuff?
Yeah, Buddhism.
Yeah,
that's the one that I was kind of like, oh, I like.
That's why I could have guessed that.
I like this a little too much.
Yep.
Yeah, not necessarily like the Tibetan or Nepalese version.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of like resonance, and then just like aesthetically, like I like the design,
Yeah.
like gold and red.
Well, there's actually a lot of overlap with Christianity and some of the practices that. Yeah. Anyway, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, we forget that Christianity is an Eastern religion, like to some extent, or at least a Middle Eastern religion, and so like these practices that kind of seem foreign, like meditation and contemplation and all these things that to a Western ear sounds like mystical and ethereal, like it's built into the fabric of Christianity from day one.
Or even like the Sermon on the Mount, and like who is blessed in the Christian framework. Like if people are interested in it, they could unpack more, but there's a lot of overlap sort of even like conceptually with it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, so I loved that. Landed on Christianity. Candidly, was a little bit mad for a season. I was very comfortable calling myself a Buddhist who followed the teachings of Christ, which is a cognitive dissonance. But I'm a 7, so I was like, yay. Enneagram 7, if you're familiar with that.
Are you also like wing 8?
I feel like I have equal wings, but I'm more comfortable in my 6 wing.
Okay, gotcha. I was gonna say it would check out for an 8
Realm.
because now they're like everyone wants to fight with them about the fact you can't do that, and they're like, yes, I can.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely like a cognitive disconnect that I'm very comfortable with in my head that I've had to get used to. But anyway, so then once I sort of landed on like Christianity, and part of the process of like rediscovering Christianity for the first time in light of all of the like comparative religion stuff that I had done was like really reading the New Testament sort of like for the first time. I actually got a copy of the Message because I wouldn't be able to like fill in the blanks based on all the memory verses that I had to learn growing up in youth group. And I'm reading this going, even if an individual never gets to the Jesus is Lord part, this is such a better way of living. Like this is the kind of society, community, family, this kind of person I want to be, a person that embodies this stuff. And so I was like, okay, great. But I grew up in a church that didn't really do any of that. So then I distinctly remember, also at this time, like I'm thinking like I'm going to be in a touring band and like a musician and all that kind of stuff. But I remember sitting somewhere thinking to myself like, okay, if I now have this knowledge that like the Christian life as described in the New Testament is this beautiful life-giving thing, and I see that the places that are supposed to be telling this story aren't doing it, what do I do with that? And it was like the first time that I thought, oh crap, I think I'm gonna end up working in a church. Because it was like, am I a wilderness prophet or a throne room prophet? Like, am I more comfortable being outside of an organization throwing stones at it or being inside of an organization trying to fix it? And just the way I'm wired, I'm like, I gotta be on the inside, trying to do change. And then of course, through the arts, that gave me like a platform that I didn't expect to be able to not only affect some of that change, but like codify it and give it a narrative and give it a soundtrack and give it a look and give it a feel and a vibe. Because for the churches that I've always been a part of, I've been, part of my role has been like the gatekeeper for what happens on Sunday morning, for lack of a better term, in a collaborative environment. But it's got to sort of go through, my area. And so I went to college in Cincinnati trying to determine like what that looked like. And I knew I loved music. I knew I loved God. So I was like, oh, okay, worship ministry. Did worship ministry in college for a while and absolutely hated it. I was like, this is not me. It's like, it's not. And at the same time that was going on, I was able to help start a young adult ministry at a church in Northern Kentucky. And that's where I met Dave Dummett, actually. Okay. And then over time, that grew. And they gave us the opportunity in the church. It was when, I don't know if you remember like when the whole church within a church phase was kind of a thing. And so they said, yeah, go ahead and be a church within a church, because the young adult thing had kind of grown and we were attracting different kinds of people, and it wasn't a big deal until, we got to that point where it was like, okay, now what do we do with this thing? Like, it's growing. It's got its own feel and identity that's now different from the incubating church, which in hindsight, like, we were probably just young and like, we're going to do our own thing, but it got to like a head where they were like, okay, you guys either need to make this an overflow or like we got to shut it down. And we're like, well, can we plant it locally? And they were like, we might consider that a church split. And so we were like, okay, what do we do with this? And that's when we found the New Thing Network. That was a church planting network out of Naperville, out of Community Christian Church, where I ended up working. And they were like, hey, there's this pastor, there's this assistant chief of police in northern Michigan who has been praying for a church for years and raising money and all this kind of stuff. And do you guys want to check it out? And we said, yeah. So I still remember to this day, we drove up there. I remember the feeling of my foot hitting the parking lot pavement and just this overwhelming sense of God going, this is what's next.
Wow.
We're like, oh, okay. So actually a bunch of us from northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area, we moved up to Michigan. We started 242 Community Church. I was there for 10 years. And then that's when Community Christian Church out here called me. And they said, basically, like, we see what you've been doing at 242. It's awesome. Would you want to come over here and do that? And right at about that time, I had been talking with Dave about like going, hey man, I think maybe there's something more. I feel like there's something in me that I might not be able to use here. And that journey was about a year long. One of my personal convictions is if I ever leave staff, I never want it to be a surprise to my boss or some of my peers. And so, there was a lot of like Christian brother hats. I was like, hey, I know this is weird because you're my boss, but you're also my friend and my pastor. Yeah. So can we talk about something and both try to be as mature as possible during this? Because I trust you, And Dave and I met, I was 18 or 19 when we met. I was like right in college.
Crazy.
So I've known him for years. And then another kind of longish story short, but the Community Christian thing worked out. Came up here. I was there for 10 years. And Sean Williams, the new senior pastor at Willow Creek now, as of April 1st, a couple of days ago, he was my boss at Community Christian Church for 6 years before he left to go to Central in Vegas. And he came back, and Dave, came to Willow I think 5 years ago, and Sean a couple years after that. And over time, they asked me to be a part of it, and I did not want to go, candidly, because I was like, man, this is not me. I love church plants. I love the feeling of smaller churches. I love that kind of stuff. But God just continuously kind of puts me in different spaces.
Takes you through the door.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I very much felt beautifully, lovingly cornered, into this. And the first year there was probably the hardest year of ministry in my life, I think.
Yeah.
But 3 years in, it's beautiful, and the team has stepped up in beautiful ways. Like it's really awesome right now. Yeah, and continuing to get better, which is also really fun.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, like as you think about the things that you were doing at your previous ministry seasons, right? Whether 242 or Community Christian, like as you stepped into that year of the hardest season of ministry, like what were some of the things that you were bringing with you that you got to apply in that season to kind of help shift the culture and the temperature there? That while difficult, like you can kind of see that through line, as you're kind of applying that.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was one of the few times in my life where I felt like God was like, remember all those things I put you through? This is why. Yeah. Which scares me for whatever might be next eventually, because I'm like, uh-oh. if you used everything, like there's nothing left. Anyway, that's kind of cryptic. But so for me it was like, as somebody who had been a worship pastor, had been a creative director, had been a production director, had been the graphics person, the video person, the storyteller, like all of that stuff. It was neat because I had, in the experiences that I had had, going from initially a volunteer to then a part-timer, to then an abused part-timer, to then an underpaid full-timer, to the like all of the typical church, creative staff journey. I came into Willow Creek with a very defined sense of boundaries, right? Like very much like I was like, I am not going to sacrifice my family. I'm not going to sacrifice my mental health. I'm not going to sacrifice my physical health for a small K kingdom, right? And thank God I had been a part of churches where that was like encouraged, and it was the norm. It was like, yeah, work hard, of course, because excellence honors God and inspires others, but like, don't kill yourself, you know? And so it was interesting because like one of the first things that I did when I got, you know, to Willow Creek was like, hey, we're all going to take Friday off. Which if you've ever done church production stuff before, or church art stuff, like that's the frantic last minute, got to get everything ready so you can maybe have a Saturday off so that you can be prepared for a Sunday.
Yep.
And I was like, no, like a Sabbath day is totally scriptural and totally biblical. And why is it the church is the place that we can get fired for demanding that we have the thing that's in the Bible? Like it's crazy to me, like it's mind blowing. So that was, I think, one of the big things that I think helped, you know, both personally and organizationally. It was like, hey, I know that this is a place that has consistently valued excellence and quality and you know, production values and talent through the roof. And it's like, all that stuff is not bad, but it does reach a tipping point where it probably doesn't matter that much as we think it does, because then it might shift into like a pride issue, which then becomes a heart issue, you know. But there's this whole other, there's like tons of scriptures of rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Like there's this whole other embodiment of who we are as Christian workers or creative people or whatever that totally gets ignored in this like ethos of like go, big, grow. And so part of the thing that we've been trying to capture both implicitly and explicitly is that passage of scripture that says like, seek first the kingdom of heaven and his righteousness, and all these things will be added. And if you look at the verses right before that, it's like the birds are going to be taken care of and like food is going to be fine. And it's like these physical material needs.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting that most churches that I know focus on like the giving and the attendance and all these sort of things. But you see this promise here in scripture that says, seek first the kingdom and its righteousness, his righteousness, and all those things will be added. So a lot of what we've been talking about artistically has been like, okay, what's it look like as an arts and worship team to primarily be focused on the righteousness of God and the kingdom? Like, what does that look like? And how, if we do that well and we become a group of people who are sold out for God, who have massive amounts of trust for one another, then I think the excellence and the quality and the attractiveness and all that stuff is just going to become this natural byproduct. We're going to become unconsciously competent in all of these things that maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, even the churches I was a part of would have been the primary goal. Like, no, it's got to be better. It's got to be better. I'm like, yes, of course, we know that. But I want to get there differently in this season. So that was some of it. I feel like I'm dancing around the answer.
No, it's great.
No, these are the things
for me,
that, you know, whether it's a production person or creative or a worship pastor, like people listening have had to have that exact same wrestling experience. Or can relate to the Frantic Friday that you mentioned, you know. So, you know, hearing someone who's at a church, like you said, that has been viewed as a church that is high production or whatever, you know, how many Q to Q rehearsals are we going to do, and how late are we going to stay to get it perfect, and like, you know, all that stuff. Like, what does it look like to focus on health, culture, you know, longevity, wholeness, and say that stuff will come? So I don't know. You can talk about that all day long because it's something that is really a challenge for most people in this space.
It really is, and I think the Big C Church has really, I mean, when I've done some church consulting and counseling, like I say this kind of aggressively, I was like, I think the Big C Church has lied to artists, right? Because if you read most job descriptions, especially for worship pastors, it's like, you know, help us create a transcendental experience that honors and worships God and all this kind of stuff. But then, you know, I don't know anybody that gets fired for not doing that, right? They get fired for moral failure, for inappropriate boundaries, for, you know, not having the discipline necessary to like turn in PO reports and like all this stuff, you know, like, and so what you have is you have this like bifurcation where there's this whole organization called the church in, you know, the US that goes, here's what we need you to do and how we need you to function on the weekend. And it's primarily just a talent-based thing. And so there's a group of pastors out there who may have pastor in their title, but are not held accountable to pastoral things, who don't take that pastoral side of their job seriously.
Yeah.
And most production people that I know of are uncomfortable with the word pastor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, pastor is just shepherding people, and every one of them has a team.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of them has a department, for the most part. If they're
yeah,
healthy
of course,
to
yeah.
be, And I'm going, you have a pastoral function if you're in the church. Period. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with that other passage scripture that says where it's take up your cross and follow me. Mm. And as a creative person, I was like, what does that even mean for me to take up my cross? Can I apply that to my art? Can I apply that to my artistic, creative life, my technical life? And I just remember sitting in it was the end of a silent retreat. There you go. See, Ignatian spirituality, yes. My Jesuit wing. I was part of a silent retreat, and I really felt God saying, if you're going to devote your art to me in the church, it's no longer your art. The highest use of your art is no longer to feel fulfilled in your art. Mm. Because if you're doing art, if you're giving that sacrifice to the church, if you're giving that gift to the church, now that art has to have an outcome. That outcome is helping people see God more holistically, right? Maybe for the first time, maybe whatever. Which means that a lot of times I might not be able to be fully fulfilled artistically because not everybody in the seats is an artist. Mm-hmm. There's engineers, there's soccer moms, there's teachers, there's people that have all sorts of different things going on in their life. And so artsy fartsiness can't be the ultimate ethos. I need to be willing to lay that on the ground. Yeah. Right? And so I think about that in production where it's hey, that third compressor on the vocal doesn't matter in the big.
Are you sure?
I know. Somebody just, some butts just puckered. I know that. But it's but it doesn't really matter if you spent an hour and a half there, but you have a team of people that you don't know what's going on in their lives.
Yep.
Right? And so that is this weird balance that we're trying to figure out, that we've been trying to figure out for the last 3 years. We can't abandon excellence. We can't abandon quality because, like I said, that honors God and inspires others, right? There's a value that comes with that. But if we do that at the detriment of fulfilling the Great Commission, which is go in all the world and make disciples, right? Then we're not doing our job as Christ follower first, then pastor in a church second. And our talent does not exempt us from the Great Commission, right? It actually gives us, in my opinion, it actually makes it easier for us to go make disciples because people go, I want to learn how to do that. 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 So they're immediately attracted to the spectacle that we can sometimes create, which gives us an easier on-road into what's going on in your life. I'm not just going to teach you how to turn a knob. I'm not just going to teach you how to strum a guitar or hit a drum. We're doing this for God. So do you know God? Do you have a relationship with God? How is that? Do I see the fruit of the Spirit evidence in your life? It feels like a no-brainer to some extent because you're well, yeah, you work in a church. You should of course be thinking about God. But the amount, I've had conversations now for 24, 25 years where it's oh, you've never had a spiritual conversation with your volunteers? Come on.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be okay.
I'd be curious as you think about crafting that experience for your teams, your staff, volunteers, whatever, in the last 3 years. What are some of the practices that you've started to implement? You mentioned the Sabbath, but I don't know, what are some of the things that come to mind? If someone's listening and thinking, okay, I want to invest a little more energy into that in my context.
Yeah.
What are some of the first things that come to mind as far as these are going to get you started down that road?
Yeah. I think if you're a leader wanting to do that, you have to model it. That's the thing. Paul was very explicit when he said, follow me as I follow Christ, right? And so you've got to be very comfortable and very familiar with that tension and kind of know when to balance this out. One of the things that I love doing, and I've asked a lot of people who are on the team that struggle with this to do, it's your calendar represents your priorities and put on there volunteer time. Or, you can literally look at your weekly schedule and go, during these 3 hours or these 2 hours, I'm going to be praying for someone. I'm going to be reaching out to someone. I'm going to be opening myself up for a coffee conversation. I'm going to be doing whatever. So that's one of the very practical things. One of the other things is is there enough time, and is a Sunday morning calm enough that you can goof off with a volunteer for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes? If there's a conversation, and so some of that stuff is like being intentional about creating room for that. Okay, so how prepared are you during the week? When you are pinning a stage or you're like prepping Pro Presenter, are you doing that as quickly as possible, or are you getting lost in the sauce?
Yeah.
Right? Are you spending 30 minutes picking out the perfect font when it's like, okay, come on, just spend an hour, find 9 that you like, rotate those, spend the rest of the time with volunteers. So there's little things that we kind of do that. We've done a lot of budget stuff to make sure that we have enough budget dollars for coffees and meals and meetings and stuff like that. Those things are really important. The team went through if you're familiar with the book Hero Maker, it's a great book. It's a great reference for like being intentional about how to see the strength in other people and how to give them a platform to thrive and stand on. It's a ton of conversations as a team. It's that reiterating, like, you are a pastor first. You are a pastor first, even if it's not your title. You have a pastoral function. And candidly, like, there were people that were uncomfortable with that language because some churches don't ever expect their production people or their worship pastors to actually function as a pastor. And yikes. So some of those things are practical. It's been a ton of conversations, like the amount of one-on-ones that I've had over the last 3 years, just really helping people just sort of explore that, because you're paradigm shifting for a lot of people. But then the other thing is to realize that it is learnable. Like I've never met anybody that has flat out honestly said, I absolutely hate people.
That's good, man.
I'm surprised, but I'm glad to hear that.
Right.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think like when you were saying it, earlier, of like the fulfillment in what we get from, if you're creative or whatever that looks like you can only use, or you use the church as a platform to fulfill your creative side, and doing it for yourself versus God, and who am I actually, like, am I doing this because it's really fun for me, or because I'm wanting to do this thing, or is it because, hey, are people actually going to come to know Jesus more or become closer to Jesus through the things that we're putting out? And it's a completely different paradigm shift from most churches in the United States, and also, looking at the group of people you're with now, and the church that was, Willow Creek 10, 15 years ago is very different than that today. And that's hard, because it feels like when you come in and you're like, hey, I want you to do these things excellent, but also you have to build in margin in your week to love on the people. Like, that's ultimately like our goal as leaders in the church. Like, it feels like you're taking away the thing that I love the most, my creative expertise, my ability to program lighting or do whatever, build some amazing stage set, to now just do something that I don't want to do, or that is harder for me to do, because it's easy to not meet with your volunteers. It's easy to not go to lunch, and because it's emotionally draining for a lot of people. Like, it's hard. Introvert, it's like, it's just hard. You have to recharge after, some of those conversations. But that's I think an interesting way for you to look at that and just go, man, like, we find our identity in the things that we do, and the church shouldn't be the platform to fulfill our creative needs personally, at the expense of people and volunteers and staff and all of that. But
yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, like, I'm an introvert, so my growth path on this was kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to need a nap after this conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's like, talking a lot.
Dude, yeah, man.
Looking each other in the eye. It's like,
yeah. How did your, like, when you jumped on at Willow and started those conversations from people that have been there a long time? There's a lot of, like, long time people that had been there before, and this is the case for so many different churches. But when you walk in as the new guy and being like, hey, you're not trying to say you're doing it all wrong, but just to go, man, where are the priorities shifting, and where do they need to shift to become the church that we want to be, or become the people and leaders that we want to be? Like, how did people respond to that? Because, and I'm sure it's a wide spectrum of it, but I just go, I think we've all had bosses that have, or the new guy that have come in, they're like, hey, this is your new boss. And then they come in and they're like, hey, we want you to do things differently than the way that I had been doing it or whatever that is. And it just feels icky and hard. And just like as the leader who had to do that, like how did people respond and like how did you help navigate them through that? And I know you're saying like lots of conversations, all this stuff, but like, people are hard, man.
They can.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, it's a pretty large team. So the responses were all over the place.
Sure.
There were some people like, oh, thank God, this is what I've been feeling in my soul. I just didn't know how to articulate it. There were other people that legitimately, and rightly so, were like, why? What we did worked. Like what we were doing worked.
Yep.
And I think it's not like a leap to look at the church landscape in the U.S. I don't think it's a leap to look at it and go, I think something's wrong.
Yeah.
Like there's a new article of somebody screwing up like every other week. And it's public and it's gross and it's like the epitome of debauchery. Like it's not like, oh no, they bought beer at the thing. It's like you were doing what with how old?
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And so to some extent to look at that and go, oh yeah, the church is fine. Like we can just keep doing what we were doing because it was working. You go, no. You were measuring the wrong things at the end of the day, like nickels and noses. Like, okay, great. That is one way to measure growth. I mean, Acts 2, whatever, it's the Lord added to their number daily. So there's nothing unbiblical about tracking growth as a metric. But the amount of times that it's like paralleled with, the fruit of the Spirit, are you these kind of things? And so the few people that had like really difficult opposition to some new stuff, some of them were able to turn around. Some of them I helped leave well.
Yeah.
Because it was mutual. Like there was not a lot of firing going on, but it was just like this mutual understanding of like, hey, we're headed in a different direction.
Yeah.
And some people were like, I love it. Some people were like, I hate it. I think because I think most people, I'm generalizing, I hate generalizing, but at least at Willow Creek, because what we had gone through was so public.
So public.
And I wasn't there for any of that. Like I said, just 3 years. There was a lot of hurt. There was a lot of leftover pain. There was a lot of leftover confusion. These are good people that didn't do anything wrong, who were caught up in this thing. And now they're looking around going, who can I trust? Is anybody trustworthy? Are we just going to do the same thing that we did and get the same results that we got? Like what's in place? And of course, there's a ton of, legal stuff you can put in place and board stuff you can put in place and all that stuff. But there just needed to be a heart posture change. We spent the first ton of time just focusing on trust. It was just a ton of trust. And it was building, like I needed to, as the leader, I needed to be able to let people know, like, you can trust me as much as, as much as you're willing to.
Yep.
I hope you can. So it was a lot of vulnerability. It was a lot of like, I don't like that either. And people going, we can talk about that. We can be that open. And I'm like, yeah. Very regularly I would sit in meetings with people and I would be like, tell me, like respond openly to what I just said.
Yeah.
You will not offend me and you will not get fired. Go.
It's a big question to ask.
Yeah. And you could see like, I don't trust you. I'm not going to do it. I had people say like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
5 years ago, had I been as honest as I want to be, you would have fired me on the spot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no. We're going to be different. We're going to be different. There's too many arts landscapes at churches that are barren and dry. And I want to have the greenest grass at any church in the U.S. Like that's what we're trying to do. Like I want people banging our doors down, to go, I can be everything that God called me to be there, do amazing art, and be healthy. Yeah. Because too many churches spin out abused technical people, abused, hurt worship pastors, abused, hurt. And I'm like, that's horrible that's their memory of working for a church, right? And then B, like they're going to take that hurt to the next church. Yep. And it's just going to get codified and it's going to get deeper. So if we can create an environment that's healthy, then that means that if you stay, you can be the healthiest version of yourself. But if you go, we now get to send the healthiest people, the healthiest artists in the planet to other churches, which then, of course, will help other church cultures and environments thrive. So I don't know if I fully answered your question.
No,
You can see I'm got a soapbox here.
that's great,
and
man.
we're early in the process. So
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of leads to what I was thinking of next is like you've been here for a season and you've kind of worked through some of those initial things, those crises and, big changes and whatnot. Like as you look at the next 3 years, sort of where do you see the focus shifting to as you people are a little more aligned, people understand where you're going. There's a little bit more cohesion there. So then what's the next hill to climb and dream that you're moving towards as a team?
Yeah, totally. So the first focus for 3 years was definitely the soft skills. It was trust. It was enough relational collateral to be, artists do this obnoxious thing. I do the same thing too, where it's like if there's not a mutual vulnerability and understanding of safety, then you can never get to like behavior modification, for lack of a better phrase. Right? And so for me to come in and immediately be like, hey, you need to change this on your weekends and lead that way, it would have just destroyed people. Of course. Because even healthy artists, you can't help but be like, well, that's just not a song I'm playing. That's my heart on display for all to see.
Yeah.
So when you say you don't like that, you don't like me, right? And so that's a maturation process that needs to happen over time. And so we've been focusing on that stuff specifically, weekly for the first 3 years. Because I knew that if we didn't start with a foundation of, like I said, fertile soil, where everybody feels like they're trusted and seen, they have agency, their input matters, they are actually trusted, not just a cog in a massive wheel that's churning out weekend services. If they felt that way, then we can move on to like the next phase, which is really focusing a lot on what we've been talking about internally, like this prove it phase, right? So if we say as a department or if we say as individuals that we value something and somebody says prove it, how do we respond? And so there's this model that we've been playing with where it's like these 3 concentric circles. And in the middle, it's values. The other circle is behaviors and actions. And then the outer circle is language and stories. And so if you imagine them as dials, if they're out of congruency, right? Everybody feels that inherent like tension, like you can't trust it. So for example, like if you say, well, I don't want to use the United States as an example because that might get too political, but like if you say something like if we were to be in this room and you say like, I value water, that's a high value for here. And then I ask, can I have some water? And you go, we don't actually have any water. But the signs around the room, the language, the stories are people drinking water. There's immediately a disconnect. And that's like a stupid example.
Yeah.
But that's And so, but that happens a lot, right? So if a church says, we love everyone, and then you look at the social media posts of, the people, and it's very aggressive and has clearly defined enemies. But then you go walk into the church Sunday morning and it's like, everyone's valued on this big sign. You immediately go, that they're incongruent. This is not who, I don't think I can trust this person.
Yeah.
And so we've been on a journey where we've been going through like values and saying, okay, if we value preparation, we value spiritual preparation, musical preparation, technical preparation, what are the benchmarks that prove that we value that? It's very straightforward. Like it's not rocket science, but it's that whole line of where it's like, I will not give God that which costs me nothing, right? Like if it's a value, it should cost you something. It doesn't have to be a huge cost. It can be time, it can be some money, it can be whatever, but you have to be able to see that value of spiritual preparation, the benchmark that proves that proves that we value that is every worship pastor spending a minimum of an hour singing and praying through the songs for that weekend before it ever gets put on stage, right? And so that's the stuff that we're now going to be shifting into holding each other accountable to, And so we're working on a list of those things. We're working on making sure that they're understood, and really we're like, there's going to be like calendar checks. Like my other church, like it was like, okay, show me your calendar and I'll tell you your values. Because
That's
if you don't have
vulnerable,
volunteers
man.
on there, one of them like specifically is like volunteer engagement.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, if I don't see that weekly on your calendar, don't tell me you value volunteers because you can't prove it. So, and not being a jerk about it.
No,
right? 'Cause
yeah.
it's like everybody, if you're not naturally good at this, it's going to take a while to get comfortable. There's an on-ramping process, right? And this is not designed to be a gotcha. This is not designed to be a you're out.
Yeah.
It's designed to say like let's describe the environment that we would all love to be in, and then let's intentionally systematize how to get there. And the only way to do that is for mutual accountability and for like super clear next steps and super clear stuff. Plus because we have like this, we're a multi-site church. The worship pastors that are at a campus have dual solid lines. So there's somebody in the central that they report to and somebody at the campus that they report to. And so sometimes that's like a weird like mom and dad kind of environment. Like, oh, mom's happy, but dad's upset, or dad's happy and mom's upset. And so the other thing that this will do intentionally is, and I can go to all the campus pastors that lead these campuses and say, this is what we value as a central arts and worship department.
Yeah.
These are the things that if you ever are thinking like, well, what are they doing on Tuesday or what are they doing, whatever. Like, these are the things that we value, that we feel will make a beautiful, thriving, healthy, amazing environment that will then result in amazing, phenomenal, life-changing art on the weekend and opportunities on the weekend. And so then it now feels more like a partnership where we're saying, like, can you help us help your staff create margin and time and space for these things?
That's awesome.
Instead of this like this dueling of like, well, you guys are asking for more time, but I actually need them to do this. And it's like, okay, fine. So that's the next step. It's really, and we're calling it this values and benchmark season where we're about to roll it out here pretty soon. So
I love that because I remember the first multi-site church I came on staff at, my first day, a meeting with my boss at the time, and he's walking me through an org chart. And I will never forget, him drawing all of these names on the board. And it was very similar context where I was a central employee, but tied to a campus. And I remember him saying, whether I actually agree with it or not, like, he's like, this is like a rubber band that you're going to constantly feel pulled one direction or the other. And eventually some of them snap and it snaps you and it hurts and you got to grab the other side and keep going back and forth. And again, I don't know if I fully love that analogy, but I think the way that you're describing that, of going, man, we are here to help support the values of us as a church, like globally, as of whatever the organization is doing, and going, we're only here to set you up for margin for your team to actually do that, which I think is amazing. And also, like, as you were talking about that with the calendar, which I love, I think a lot of people in churches view biblical accountability as micromanagement. And it's just not true. Like we had an episode with Brian Taylor, and there was a clip that we had put out where
those were great.
He's so good, man. He's a rock star. And just talking about, like, man, who are we to think that, like, my boss can ask this, but he can't ask this, and just supposed to take my word for it? Yeah, of course I'm meeting with volunteers, but to go, hey man, it's been a quarter. And we had some metrics that we wanted to see X number of coffees or lunches or whatever with. We provided you all the resources. Right. We gave you the money. We gave you all this stuff, but you didn't do that. Your priorities are very clearly lined out. I look at my calendar now and I go, anybody from the outside could look at my calendar and know what my priorities are. And so I love that perspective of it, but I'm sure that it took a posture shift of those people receiving that accountability, maybe for the first time, to go, oh, this isn't just Jeff being, I want to know what you're doing every second. I don't think anybody cares about that. It's going, we want to hold you accountable in a biblical way to go, this is the end goal. We're building the kingdom with more people in it and knowing Jesus and knowing who he is through that. But
yeah, and as a leader, like, I outed myself. I was like, I know that some of the people in this room are hearing this going, yes, clarity, this would be great. Like, now I know exactly what the tier of bosses above me expects and wants from me, right? I would not be that person. I would be the other person going, are you freaking kidding me? Right. You either trust me to do the job or you don't.
Yeah.
Right? But this is the goofy thing about the church environment that's been created. It's trust to do the job for most bosses that don't understand, most senior pastors or executive pastors that don't understand arts, all they see is the output on Sunday morning.
Yep.
And they think that's the job. It's like, ooh, that is the outpouring of the job.
Yeah.
To some extent.
Yeah.
And so that's the tricky bit, trying to get in there. But what you just said about like, if you're in an environment where you're in a meeting with somebody and you're like, hey, we value volunteer engagement, and I've noticed that hasn't been happening, think about how much fun that next conversation is, right? Because you're going, and I that exact scenario happened to me in my last church because I love doing this kind of stuff. And I said, I need to ask you some questions. Was it just because you were crazy busy for an entire month, which might be the case?
Yep.
You know, if there's a big project, maybe. Or is it that you fundamentally don't agree with this value? Because as a boss, the last thing I want to do is force you to do something week in and week out, month in and month out, that you fundamentally disagree with.
Yep.
Because you will slowly die, and I will get more and more upset. And then eventually it's going to end up in this giant explosion where you're pissed off. I have the authority to fire you. I fire you on the spot. And then now we're in that goofy thing with a whole congregation that loves you, that feels you as their pastor, going like, what just happened?
Yep.
Because on stage you're fine, but you know, Monday through Thursday, you're not. And so these are great conversations, because a lot of the staff transitions that we've had has been in those conversations where we're going, is this just not a value for you?
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to judge you if it's not, because there are tons of different churches on the planet that function really well and can do things differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if it's not a value, if it's not a shared value, this will only get worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, there's no coming back from that. If the person then finally says, like, it's actually not a shared value, it's like, can it become one?
Yep.
Because you're here now. God's got you here now. Is this something God's trying to grow in your life? Or did we just come up with the biggest piece of vocational clarity that we both need on how to move forward?
Yep. Well, and all of that trust and relational collateral that you're describing is the only way that you can get to that conversation of going, hey man, it's okay if it's not a shared value. But the question after what you just asked is the most important of one is, can it become one? Right. It doesn't have to become one tomorrow, and it doesn't have to mean you have 30 different coffees in the month of April.
Right, yeah.
It just means over time, this is where we are headed, and how are we going to incrementally grow to become in this way? And they might find that it's awesome, and they might find that it's, I actually do hate it, and I don't want to do it, and I'm not good at it.
Yeah.
And then you're able to go, okay, that's fine. Now, how do we send them off into the next best way? Because man, how many of our friends have been in that seat where all of a sudden everything blows up? You know, from a Sunday everything's fine to a Monday, and you leave bitter, and you take that into the next church, and you do it for a couple of years, and then it happens there, and you quit, and you do it again at the next church over and over and over again for 20 years. You know,
Yeah, I've helped multiple people that we've come to that conclusion. And I go, okay, well then let's figure, like, let me help you leave well, because I hate the way a lot of people leave churches.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I've helped them find their next job. And it's like the weirdest thing in the world, because they're like, you're kind of firing me? I'm like, no, we fired you. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we've decided to let you go collectively.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then they're freaked out because they're like, you're legitimately helping me find a job. I'm like, yes, because you're not a bad person.
Yeah.
Like, we just finally got to the point of clarity where we're going, oh, you just fundamentally disagree on where we're headed. That doesn't make you bad or wrong. That doesn't make me bad or wrong. That just means, okay, this is probably not going to be the spot. So we don't need to be weird about it. Let me help you find a spot where you fit, where you can thrive, where you can bless the kingdom through, you know, the work that you're going to do there. And then we get the privilege of celebrating you on the way out. Now the narrative is different.
Yeah.
You know, and then you leave going, that was a good place.
Yeah.
They cared about me. I felt seen.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's just, man, I hate seeing the opposite of that, which is what we all see all the time. And it's hard for people to fundamentally understand. That's like, unless I have that trust, when you ask, you know, in your meeting with your entire team of like, hey, now respond to what I just said, good or bad, and I'm unoffended by it. They have that feeling in the back of the mind of going, well, if I actually disagree with this person, then ultimately it will always lead to me leaving, whether it's good or bad or whether I want to or not.
Right. And that's part of I think that's part of the fun of building like a healthy environment is being able to say, no. In some ways, a disagreement means we can't work together. Those are very few and far between.
Yeah.
A lot of times a disagreement means what our final output becomes will be more robust and holistic because you're coming at this thing from a completely different direction than I am. Which means when we land on what's going to hit the stage or when we land on the system or the process that we're going to implement, now it's going to be that much better because it's not just my perspective, it includes your perspective.
Yeah.
It includes your area of expertise. And that's something that I think as a multi-site church, like especially a big one, we're also trying to work really hard in doing because a lot of churches, I think the bigger that they get, the more centralized they get because efficiency becomes a value that trumps all other values. And I'm not against efficiency. Like I want things to run smoothly, duh. But I also look at scripture and I go, as soon as someone can show me efficiency in the Bible, I will value it higher than everything else. The most efficient thing for Paul to do would have been to write one letter and just give it to Rome, give it to Ephesus, give it to Philippi, give it to Thessalonica. But he didn't. He realized that each one of those churches in each one of those different cities or towns had a unique need, needed God to show up in certain ways, needed different wisdom, right? And so as a multi-site church, I'm going, well, I got 9 different bodies here in 9 different communities with 9 or 10 different, ideas. And then if you're a large multi-site church that's been around for a while, you also have churches that are in different life stages.
Yeah.
That are in different areas of growth. So I'm very much trying to figure out like how can I also, and this is stuff that we've been working on for 3 years as well. Like I want our worship pastors to come knowing that I trust them to be the experts in what that congregation needs. Because none of their volunteers will ever call me if grandma's sick.
Yeah.
So for me to sit in a central office and legitimately be like, I know how to pastor your people better than you is awful.
Yeah.
Right? But that's also an opportunity for bidirectional trust now because I am ultimately the shepherd of the shepherds, right? So I'm going, if I don't trust that you know your congregation and that you're praying for them and that you're meeting with them, when we do get into that little opinion battle about a song or a video, I don't know your heart to know that if you're speaking from a place of like pastoral conviction or opinion. Because we're not going to play the opinion game because there's 30 of us in this room, right? But if I know how much you love your people and you go, I'm sorry, Jeff, that idea, I know there's a lot of energy around it. I just don't think it's going to fly. Then I go, okay, I know you. I know you love your people. Is there a way to make it work that could work? Nope. Okay, let's do a different idea. Yeah. And for multi-site, like that's kind of different. I don't know a lot of places that function that way. But it's been fascinating to watch some of our worship pastors and technical directors just thrive in that environment because finally it's like, yeah, you're the expert at your campus.
Yeah. Well,
get your ego out of the way, get your opinions out of the way, but know your people. Let that fuel the ministry that you do.
Well, and that ultimately is the beauty of what multi-site is and should be, and is not very often the way that many churches function in that context, because it can feel like, oh, the boss and then all of my children all over at these campuses are just who knows what they're doing, and or hey, your campus is an hour and a half away from me. We only see each other once a month, in person, whatever that looks like. But to have that trust both directions, because man, how many campuses have we all been a part of where we're just like, oh my gosh, screw Central, man.
Right.
There's stupid ideas and all the things, and they're taking budget from me to help make things more efficient and spread it amongst everybody else. Versus, it's hard, man. In both from the central seat and the campus seat to have trust bi-directional, like you're describing. Takes a lot of effort and energy that isn't always very efficient to figure out.
And it creates a fun environment too, because like I also need the trust that I'm closest to the content, right? So like I'm in the teaching pastor meetings, like I'm close to the series maps that we're creating, and so there are some creative moments where because I'm really close to the content and have been thinking about it for months, where it's just like, guys, I think we all should do this.
Yeah.
Because this hits a core human thing that transcends demographic or, region. Like, this is a human truth that this piece or this song like fully can exemplify. And so like it's this fun back and forth between like hopefully I'm living in such a way that you guys can trust me when I say those things, that this is something we should do collectively because it's the best way to storytell this service. But then at the same time, I also need to make sure that you all know that I trust you implicitly and explicitly for making decisions at your campus. And so if we can do both those things right, you end up getting the best possible outcomes out of both things. You get a campus that feels local and represents and reflects the community heartbeat of that place. But then you also get all the benefit of being part of a larger organization and the best ideas that come from a diversity of ideas that then just makes everybody better.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is we're kind of all over the place.
Well,
That's great.
I'm curious. We've been talking a lot about like the team and how that's been developing and growing and kind of the stretching and molding of that, But I'm curious for you, maybe a good place to kind of wrap around and kind of land in is like as you're being the person to lead through a lot of that and crafting faith experiences for other people is your job. Mm-hmm. How does that play out in like creating your own faith experiences and crafting your own, trajectory of growth or reflection or Sabbath or whatever that means to you as I'm saying those words, differentiation and like all that kind of stuff. Like, what does that look like in this season and how are you working on it going forward?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So, like about 15 years ago, I was at a church service and I noticed, and my wife noticed, that I was critiquing it. We were visiting a church and I had no business critiquing it. I just could not enter in. They weren't doing a bad job, but it was like, I wonder why they picked blue. I wonder why they, just because it's the way I'm wired. Like you do it long enough, you can't help but see those things. And I remember my wife kind of looking at me with this like very sort of like, stop, what are you doing? Like just worship God. And she kind of said it that way, And I was like, oh. And then it really dawned on me, like, I don't know the last time that I've really worshiped God with reckless abandon. Or the last time that I read scripture for no outcome other than to spend time with God. And it was like, ooh, because you're close to it 24/7. It's like, yeah, of course I study the Bible all the time. Well, it's like, well, I'm studying it to find like a verse that matches with that song. I'm not studying it for me. I'm not studying it for God. I'm studying it for an outcome. So that started a long journey of me figuring out like, okay, who am I? What do I need to do? Personally, I fell into a bunch of Ignatian spirituality. So I'm functionally like a practicing Jesuit-ish, because I just needed to find something that was so different, that pulled me in ways that I had never been pulled. And it's really fascinating because like not every Catholic church, but the ones that I've attended, the priests that I've spoken to, my spiritual director is a Jesuit priest. They don't give a crap about the stuff that I think about 24/7 in my church job. Like I remember talking to him about like Easter, because that's coming up. Like I remember talking about this was a couple of years ago, like stressing out about this project that we had coming up for Easter, and he's like, Easter shouldn't be stressful. Like it's this beautiful time to celebrate God. And I'm like, well, you're a priest. Like, isn't it busy for you guys? And he's like, well, we do an extra mass. And I'm like, it was like mind-blowingly foreign. And he's like, oh, I can tell you what I'm going to do on Easter in 2073. I'm like,
it's all laid out.
Exactly.
Imagine that.
Yeah. I'm like, that's amazing. And he goes, yeah, where I get stressed out is, and he didn't use the word stressed out. He said, but where it's a little bit more challenging around, Lenten season, is he goes, a lot of family members come in. And so I've got parishioners whose parents are on their deathbed and their parents don't attend a parish or a church and they want to meet with a priest. And so, yeah, my schedule gets a little bit busier. And I remember thinking like, my schedule has never gotten so busy with people. And it was just like this.
Everything else,
yeah, it's mind-blowing thing. So I started doing a ton of those practices. So if you're familiar with Ignatian spirituality, there's a lot of like contemplative practices. There's a lot of meditative practices. There's a lot of like creative scripture reading. The daily examine is something I do daily because it's called that, and it's a good practice. My family does it as well. Both my boys every night do the daily examine. We Sabbath like literally religiously every Friday. You will not be able to get a hold of me. It was kind of a joke when I started, at Willow, but quickly everybody was like, oh gosh, you were serious? I'm like, yeah, I'm very serious about this.
Yeah.
And that's just a time to focus on God, focus on family. What I love about Sabbath that I didn't expect is that it reminds me that the world is just fine without my participation. And that felt so good. As someone who has, for years, has felt the weight of liturgy, the weight of the weekend thing, to just realize that God's going, I don't love you because of what you do. I love you because of just who you are. That's been really, really awesome. And then also be able to model that for my two boys. I mean, my gosh, they're 12 and 14 now, so they're right at my oldest is right at the cusp of like starting to, go, okay, like what does this Christian look like in my life, and being able to like model what I think and feels like a ton of health is awesome. When we were building the project at the Yellow Box Community Christian Church, the auditorium there. If you've ever had the opportunity to do that, I mean, it's a ton of work. I led AVL, primary architecture, FF&E, and what was the other one? Interior design.
So the whole thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was the point, like the church point person, but there were people that we worked with in the design build firm. And so there's a lot of late nights, there's a lot of working extra. And I remember my wife was telling me a story, and then I experienced it, where my kids sometimes at dinner would say, hey, you guys remember Dad? And I was like, oh. So this was right at the beginning of our serious Sabbath journey. And then fast forward a couple years, we were taking it very seriously. My second son enters the world, and I was missing a lot of dinners. Like that's a big thing for us. Like I want to be present for dinner with the family. And my youngest, he goes, Dad, I missed you at dinner. And I looked down, I'm like, Dad, I was like, Ash, I'm so sorry that I missed dinner again. I'm so sorry. And he grabbed my face, his little chubby hands, he grabbed my face, and he goes, it's okay, Daddy, because I know on Sabbath you're all mine and I'm all yours. And I was like it still like wrecks me thinking about it right now. It was just this like beautiful example of like, okay, here's a kid that, of course, when you're little, like all you want to be around is your parents, and as a parent, we all know that's not feasible because we got to make, a living and all that crap. But just in his little, I think he was 4 or 5, his little 4 or 5-year-old brain, like he knew there's a day that I don't touch a computer, I don't touch a phone, very little screens, it's just us and family. It was really cool. It was like a good feeling to be like, okay, I'm on the right path.
Well, I think it's just a good reminder and example for people listening, like whatever that looks like in your context, it's going to be different for different people in different seasons.
Yep.
But what is that space, that time, that intentionality that you're able to create for you, for your family, like it has a ripple effect, especially when practiced over time. I think that's the key thing is, you'll do it once and then, okay, did that change anything? No, but do it and check back in 3 years. Yeah. Like what are the patterns and the relationships and the health that is able to flourish over that longer amount of time, I think that's a good reminder and challenge.
Yeah. It's been great too because I don't feel guilty then when I have to work extra hard. Like my first couple years at Willow was a lot of work. It was a ton of work of rebuilding and conversations, all this kind of stuff. And I made a pact with my family. I said, hey, are you guys okay if on Thursday I work as long as I need to work so that I can get done enough that my brain can actually be empty on Friday? And they were all like, of course, duh.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I was stealing anything from my family. I didn't feel like I was letting them down. I didn't feel like I was compromising my priorities or my values because we talked about it as family. They're like, of course, Dad, that makes perfect sense. Work as long and hard as you need to because we know that on Friday you can turn all that
It's
off.
like being intentional about creating the rhythms that work for you.
Right.
And again, everything's different for different people. Like Friday might not even be your day for most people.
Yeah, it was Monday for a long time.
Yeah, right, exactly. And it maybe changes in different seasons of life. It's fine. but like you don't have to follow a pattern of like here's what here's the right thing.
Right.
But like have fun with it and create the kind of flow that's going to lead to like positive outcomes for you and your family, you know?
And you might not be able to start with a full day. Like I've done a ton of Sabbath coaching. So if anybody wants help, like seriously reach out to me. I love talking about this. And I think it's and in many ways it's part of the missing link of church art health, to be
really
blunt
good.
with you.
That's so good.
But like a lot of people, I go, just start with 4 hours, start with 6 hours. Put it on the calendar, put it recurringly on the calendar. It could be an evening after school, after work, whatever, and just go 6 hour Sabbath. Wednesday night, a hard stop at 5 until the next morning. And then it's like, then you get a little bit, you know, because I think about it like tithing. Like a lot of churches say like, oh, work towards the tithe. Because how many people who have never tithed before can immediately go to 10%? Not a lot of people. That's a really hard thing to do. But you might be able to go to 1. You might be able to go to 2. Over time, you might be able to go to 3. So a lot of time in Sabbath, it's like, just start it. Just pick a chunk of time, dedicate that to the Lord and family, let it be recurring, and be obnoxiously diligent about it. Don't allow anything to change it.
Thank you for coming out and hanging with us and having this conversation. I think it's so great for so many people to, you know, just process in their own head, like, what does margin look like? What does it look like for me to do things that are more important during my middle of the week, whether it's pastoring others or loving on volunteers? And I love what you're doing and excited for this next season for you and the growth and all of the things that are happening in Willow, man.
Cool. Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. This was fun.
Yeah, we'll see you guys all next week.